So today, we're going to break down a framework from a video that makes a pretty bold claim that modern Christian parents are in a spiritual war for their kids' future. It argues for raising children not just to get by in what it calls a hostile culture, but to be Christian warriors. So let's dive in and really unpack this argument. This quote pops up right at the start of the source video, and it pretty much sums up the entire idea. The thinking here is that parenting shouldn't be a defensive game, like you're not just trying to build a protective bubble. It's supposed to be offensive. It's about training and equipping kids for what the source sees as an inevitable conflict. And that right there, that's a huge shift in perspective that shapes everything else we're about to talk about. So what's the central premise? Well, the whole thing is built on this one idea. Parenting today, it's not this peaceful, idyllic journey. No, the source argues it's an active, high-stakes spiritual war for the hearts and minds of our children. Now, the video doesn't just say that our culture has kind of drifted away from Christian values. It makes a way stronger claim. It says the culture is now actively hostile. The argument is that the major institutions, schools, the media we all watch, are run by people who fundamentally oppose a biblical worldview and, in the video's own words, actually want to destroy your family. And here is the number the source uses to really drive home how high the stakes are. It claims that a staggering 70% of kids who are raised in Christian homes end up walking away from their faith by the time they leave for college. And in the video's view, this isn't just some random trend. No, they present this as proof of what they call the systematic destruction of the next generation's faith. Okay, so if there's a war, like the source claims, then where exactly is it being fought? The video gets really specific here, pointing out several arenas where it believes this battle for influence is happening every single day. Let's have a look. The video points to these 4 big areas, and it claims they've been, in its own words, weaponized against traditional family values. The argument is that from the classroom to kids' cartoons, from pop music to the very algorithms that run social media, there's this constant flow of messages designed to chip away at a Christian worldview. And what's really interesting is how the source breaks down the actual messages it says kids are getting. I mean, just look at the slide. It claims that entertainment teaches them that parents are foolish, that rebellion is something to celebrate, and that certain biblical ideas about life are actually hateful. The whole point here is that these ideas are in direct competition with what parents are trying to teach at home. Okay, so after laying out this pretty bleak picture of the problem, the video pivots. It starts looking to the past for a solution, arguing that history actually gives us a clear blueprint for how to hold on to faith in what it sees as a hostile world. The video draws this direct line, all the way from the early Christians living under Roman rule to the pilgrims starting over in the New World. It tells the story where believers didn't just push back against the culture around them, they actively built their own alternative societies, their own economies, their own schools, all centered on their faith. And to really put a face to this idea of unshakable faith, the source brings up the story of Polycarp. This quote is held up as the ultimate example of a conviction so deep that backing down just isn't an option, not even when you're facing death. And that kind of makes you wonder, where does that kind of faith even come from? And that brings us to this really key concept, counterculture. According to the video, the solution isn't about, just making a few tweaks to how you interact with the world. It's about intentionally building a parallel culture right inside your own family, a whole way of life with its own rhythms and values that stands in direct opposition to the mainstream. All right, so now we get to the really practical part, the how-to section. The source lays out a very specific battle plan for parents who actually want to put this whole countercultural model into practice in their own homes. So the strategy has 3 main pillars. First, it urges parents to make Scripture the foundation for answering all of life's big questions. Second, it says to weave faith into the day-to-day fabric of family life through these regular rhythms of prayer and worship. And third, it makes a really direct call to seriously rethink public education, which the source sees as one of the main pipelines for negative cultural influence. And this slide right here, it shows you exactly what that first point looks like in practice. The source is basically saying that every single question your kid asks is a huge opportunity. So as you can see, instead of giving a secular answer to a question like, why do people suffer, it advocates reframing it through a biblical lens. The goal is to ground the child's entire understanding of the world in Scripture. Okay, so let's get to the end game here. How does all of this come together? What's the ultimate goal of this whole parenting framework that the source is laying out? This is a really key distinction the video makes. It calls for a total change in the main objective of parenting. The source argues the goal shouldn't just be to raise polite, successful, or good kids who have a nice, comfortable life. Nope. The goal should be to equip them for what it calls meaningful warfare, to make them strong and ready for spiritual battles. So the source really presents this as the ultimate choice for parents. You've got two paths. On one side, your kids can become casualties, just absorbing the culture around them and eventually leaving their faith. Or on the other side, as you can see in the comparison, they become warriors, ready to stand firm. The video doesn't see this as a spectrum, it's a stark, black and white choice that's determined by your parenting strategy. And this final quote, man, it just perfectly sums up the entire call to action. It's a direct challenge to any parenting style that focuses on comfort and making life easy. Instead, it argues for a style that prioritizes spiritual strength and resilience, even if that means a much harder life for the child. And so, what we're left with after unpacking this whole framework is a really big question. Is this a necessary blueprint for preserving faith in a pretty secular age, a way to get back to a stronger way of passing on belief? Or is it a strategy of retreat, one that ends up pulling kids out of the world instead of preparing them to actually engage with it? That's really the core tension at the heart of this entire argument.